I love change. I'm a change maker, I think. With all the good and the bad, I'm a change maker. For me, give me a company, give me an individual, give me a project that needs to change. No one wants to touch. Give it to me. Give it to me. I love it.
John.
Peter.
Jonathan Shaw. Welcome to the Unbrandme Podcast.
Thank you.
At Brandwagon, we have this saying, better people make better brands, and better brands make a better world. We feel that you're one of those people who are putting better brands out there in the world and will make this place a better place. It's great to have you here. As most people know out there, we're friends as well. We do some training together. We've worked together. Yeah. We worked for each other, which has all been made it interesting. And when I look at your career, your history, you know, the journey that it got you here, I don't even know where to start because there are so many chapters in the book of John. You know, we always used to joke, like, for me, the title of your book should be, Are You Sure? Yeah. John, you're a son, you're a brother, you've been CEO, you've been an author, you've become a cognitive behavioral coach, an event organizer, you've organized TV programs, you've produced TV programs, you've been a tech founder. When people ask you, who is John? Who do you say you are?
Okay. Tough one, huh? Because, as you said, I evolve. I constantly evolve. And it doesn't mean you're evolving to a higher level. Sometimes life throws curves, you know. So you're up, you're down. I have this theory of a wave. As long as you're moving forward, and then you jump from wave to wave, you're fine. So who is John? Probably someone who values change. I love change. I'm driven by change. I'm driven by transformation. I'm driven by the journey and making things happen, whatever it is.
And that's really interesting because it is true of human nature that people resist change. In fact, when we talk about, you know, change and transformation with organizations, when somebody announces change, people are scared, okay, Mela, here come the layoffs, or here come the new procedures, or here come the new process, here comes in the new CEO that's going to make my life uncomfortable as a worker. So to be someone who is actually inspired and excited by change, I think that obviously already sets you out to be one of the uncommon amongst the uncommon.
Yeah.
I think what would be interesting for the people listening or watching this podcast, especially those who are not familiar with your story, is to trace back in time, you know, where it all started. And I think an interesting angle, which maybe, you know, most podcasts haven't got into, is also your family life.
Yeah.
Because you're not an only child, right?
No.
You were one of
5 boys.
1 of 5. So tell us a bit, retrace your steps. I know it's a couple of years now.
Okay.
Because we've just celebrated your 50th. Well, it's been a while now. We're looking forward to your 51st. And hopefully you'll have a safe 51st. Yeah. And we'll talk about that story behind the scenes.
Definitely.
So John, go back in time. You're 1 of 5 kids. How did that alter your trajectory? And also maybe, you know, what were those life moments leading up to where you are today?
Okay. Yeah. In a nutshell, 1 of 5, the eldest being, so the ages were quite compressed. That makes a big difference as well. So like 18-year-old, who's my elder brother, another elder brother, like 17, something close, 1 year, 3 months. Then 7-year gap, so I'm 11. Another brother who's like 9.5, and a 2-year-old. So imagine 5 boys. My dad, working overseas, coming, traveling, so not very present in a way, but present in a lot of ways, but physically he used to travel and work a lot. So my mom had these 5 terrors to handle.
5 men to deal with.
5 men to handle. So that meant that I was very independent from a young age. Super independent. I'm the middle child, super independent. And I realized straight away that you just do it your own way. So my mom or dad never had to sit down and do homework with me or push me to do homework. They could, like for all of us. And they gave us a great life. But I was there alone from a young age. So I decided what subjects I want to do, school, changing 6th form. I changed nationality at 18 without telling them because I could get a British passport. So I decided myself, imagine 18-year-old, which is freaky now but at that age, so I used to do stuff. I got a part-time job even though I didn't need because I wanted to buy my car.
So what was your first job?
Waitering at Zeppi's in Balluta.
Of course.
Yeah. But I learned people, clients, difficult clients. I learned hard work.
And you were sportive, no? As a kid?
I used to play water polo.
For who?
Sirens and then Neptunes. So my challenge is do it yourself. That's I think clear for me.
Yeah, and I think being one of 5, especially the middle one, I think you end up having to be independent. You know that if something needs to be done, you got to do it yourself.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's not going to be done. And you also know that just waiting around and expecting something to happen, that's never going to happen. Okay, so that's your identity. Young guy, one of 5 big boys, water polo player. Change his nationality because why not? Because he could.
Yeah, I could.
And then you got into university, right? And then, okay.
I wanted to be a pilot all my life.
You worked in aviation for a while, no? In New York at some point.
Separate, yeah. So
I feel there's going to be many chapters till we get to the
point. By the way, I'm
of
50, not 80, okay? And I wanted to be a pilot. I also thought at one point of a Army, Air Force pilot kind of stuff.
Yeah, Top Gun had just come out now, I suppose.
Probably I was influenced like many. And so I just did my physics and maths A-level in 6 months just to get them out of the way, got them, and waited for Air Malta to have this call of applications. At the time, being trained as a commercial pilot was like the in thing to be. So I go through a 6-month process. I actually get selected through 400 candidates to be in the last group. There was one last test. We were in, kind of, And one test was called an EEG, where they put wires on your head and they pass a current through your brain they don't do this test anymore, nothing clinically wrong or right, but it was part of the procedure. And apparently, if the output on this graph is not in a linear line, that means your brain cell patterns are not aligned in the same direction. No one ever failed this test. Obviously, I failed.
You had to stand out somehow.
So at the age of 20, my dream of being a pilot was, when I was so close, was shattered.
Crushed in front of you just at the end.
And I remember everything stopped for me. And because I didn't go to uni, because I didn't want to, I just got my levels for being a pilot. And I remember my dad taking me out for dinner, one of the few times, just me and him, because he saw I was crushed. And I remember him telling me, John, I think you could do more than being a pilot, but I never wanted to tell you this.
Oh, wow.
And he said, and I was like feisty. I said, yeah, but there was something wrong. We should protest. I'm sure maybe they wanted me out because someone else wanted to go 10. You start thinking of everything. And he said, no, that's it. You don't. He said, you don't. I'm not going to support you going back and telling them you contest this, accept it. And it was one of the few moments that we had this, and I'll never forget this. I remember we were eating somewhere in Welbee, Slima, this Asian restaurant. I remember it clearly now that we're talking about it. So anyway, cut a long story short, I moved on. I decided, but I had a gap year. So my brother, who had a turnkey project company, says to me, why don't you come with me and help us around? And I'm really not manual. That's another thing. With 5 boys, you have division of labor. So 2 of my brothers were good with their hands. They can do all the manual work at home. I'm a disaster. Still am a disaster. And I said, I can't do anything. He said, no, just stay around. We're doing this big project. He had a job at the new Malta International Airport.
Wow.
So when my dream is crushed,
he gets so
I
close
go like a laborer, helping him move the scaffolding, because I had nothing to do. And I'm seeing planes take off and land. And I remember that was a low but very strong time in my life when I said, okay, you have to get out of this.
Well, it's one of those moments, I suppose, either makes you or breaks you.
Completely.
Clearly it made you. Okay, so then what? Because
then I got a job quickly at 7-Up. Okay. They needed an assistant production manager. Still this gap here. And George, I remember the son, gave me this opportunity, and I was on the shop floor working with these factory people, tough guys, carrying boxes, bottling. But I was their assistant production manager. So And that's where I learned and valued management and people and getting things done and work. And then
So you were quite young to get an insight on the shop floor, what it means to be, one of the workers. I think that's quite
But I wasn't, and managing people from a young age. And I learned.
Because you were managing people who presumably were much older than you as well.
Much older, but I learned that with these people, you show them respect, they give you everything. So I learned that whatever the role, show respect, yes, be tough when you need to be tough, but understand, communicate, and get your hands dirty with them. So and I remember these people, I had a great relationship, and they used to do their job because they don't want to let me down.
And that's an interesting angle of leadership, because I think today, we've gone way over those days where it's just about people telling people what to do. We've gone away from that kind of military style of working.
Yeah, completely.
I believe, and there's a great book, it's called Trust and Inspire, which I'll share with you after this. But the concept today is that we need to trust people to get on with their jobs. We need to teach them, but then we need to trust them to take the best decisions and inspire them to do better and better than us.
Yeah.
So I think that concept of, showing people respect, understanding, showing empathy, really getting to understand where they're, but also helping them understand where you're coming from, but also where you want to go is probably one of the biggest lessons,
True.
And then you moved on to...
Then I went to uni.
Okay. What did you study?
BCom management.
BCom management, okay.
I studied. I was training, partying, everything at the same time, So it was great fun. And then since I had worked before, I said, I need to do something extra, and I needed money as well.
You need to sustain you.
So I created what was Malta's first promotions events company with Gianni. We called Junkie Pesho. And we were running clubs for 3 years. That was a great time.
That's a good part of my childhood, I remember that.
Exactly. Recently I met someone, a mother, friend of my mother said, you were the cause my son used to come in late all those years. I said,
you're welcome.
Thank you. But it was different times. And this is where I started my first brand, Junkie Pesho. And this is where I realized...
That was started from kind of nowhere. And it was very different to the type of parties that all the other places used to organize, because it was a moving event.
Yes, exactly. We had different locations, and so John used to take care of the music and the creative side. I used to handle the logistics, the owners, negotiating. I used to stay at the door, crowd control, and get things in order. But I realized how to build a brand. Mm-hmm. We had no social media. Our flyers were photocopies. And we realized how to give value to sponsorships, to brands, how to build your own brand. So we created a movement. We created engagement. But it's hard work of guerrilla with no budgets.
Of course.
So the guerrilla marketing, which I still feel is important,
Because it touches people, effectively on a physical level, really, truly, because we're not talking of the digital stuff. You used to do some crazy events and also, building that reputation and knowing who was going to be there. This is pre-mobile days. This is pre-SMS days. This is, you saw the flyer, you got the poster, you probably got a physical ticket. And you turned up, and some of the locations that you organized your events weren't actually like Bank Center in the middle of Paris. You used to do Melleha, used to do...
Again, this thing of change. You go out and you create something. So I remember a club owner from Rabat had just invested and done Tattingers in Rabat, and through a contact said, this club is empty, it's new, he needs someone. And I said, let's do it. And everyone was telling me Rabat, everyone used to go to
Rabat. Drive up to Rabat.
And suddenly within a month... hundreds of cars in Rabat Road, going to this club and people. And then we had other clubs. But you keep on evolving and you keep on challenging. So this is where the wave theory comes in for me. If you stay long, look, some people are destined to be in one career, one job and one line, and there's nothing wrong as long as they keep on growing within that road. Others are meant to move. So there's no right or wrong here.
Yeah.
In my case, I used to get a kick by jumping from one wave to another wave.
So we're at the stage where you're party producer and promoter.
Yeah, uni student.
And then I was still at university.
And playing water polo.
And playing water polo, of course, why not? And then at that point in time is where you decide was this at the point where you started to launch Malta's first reality TV show, which was Flat 4, or was it?
Yes.
Wow.
So I had this idea
about Flat 4. Because this is way before.
This is way before
Big Brother and all this.
Completely.
We're talking 1998.
7, 98. I had this idea.
I was 18. I remember watching the programs.
I launched 2 things that year. Theatre Unplugged.
Yeah, we'll talk about Theatre Unplugged.
And Flat 4. So
what was
I had this
4?
idea. I was dating Nirvana at the time. And Johnny was one of my best friends. We used to organize events. And I had enough of events, late nights, loud music, a bit too much, 3 years.
Too mature for your age.
Exactly. And so I had this idea of a TV program. I said, let me rent an apartment. I got it sponsored by one real estate company. The flat number was number 4. That's why the program was called Flat 4. And I said, I'll put Johnny and Nirvana in the apartment as if they're living together. 2 friends who can't stand each other. Johnny is Johnny. Nirvana was Nirvana. With a dog, with my brother's sausage dog called Regina. And unscripted, I'll send a guest. And we film it for about 7 hours, 6 hours. They cook, they talk about life, they talk about their career, they talk about anything. And then we edit and can it into a 1-hour program.
And this was shown on national TV,
Shown on TVM. And
it must have been quite outrageous at the time.
We had a cult following.
You had a cult following.
We had a cult following. And the soundtrack, the opening track was Our House by Madness, I remember. And the dog, we did a voiceover. I got a girl to do a voiceover on the dog. And through the dog, I could take the piss of the guests, Johnny and Nirvana, because it was allowed. The dog is saying it.
Amazing.
And we used to go hardcore. And we used to discuss topics. And we had a cult following. It used to be shown weekly, and we did 13 seasons of it.
So promoting cohabitation in very, very Catholic Malta at the time, no? Very reserved Malta.
But people believed that was real. People actually believed they were a couple. People believed they were a couple.
Okay.
She was my girlfriend, and I'm like thinking that my best friend is dating her. And they lived together. So I remember even one on a church radio station, people were slamming Flat 4 and this and that. That's not right. I
suppose that's when you know that you've hit success now, when you're being talked about on other radio stations, the people are complaining.
No, it was interesting. But you know what? It was an amazing experience.
Absolutely, for sure. Okay, so then, and Theatre Unplugged, again.
Theatre Unplugged, an idea about having something different at the National Theatre. And it's still ongoing. I just resigned from being a producer after 23 years.
How does that feel?
Good. Very good.
The idea with Theatre Unplugged is basically bringing in musicians, bands who are typically on a rock stage or on a very different stage, because you've even had DJs, you've had
exactly.
Different artists playing in the National Theatre.
Yeah, in actually 5 different genres of music as well, not only rock. So 5 different mixing, opera, classic, piano, rock, pop, all in one event, but in short stints. So my wife tells me I've got ADHD, I don't know, maybe. So she said, you can't stand still, you always want change. So for me, sitting in a concert, listening to the same type of music for 2 hours,
get bored.
I get bored. So I actually played on what I would like. What if you give me 5 different acts for 15, 17 minutes each? So it's fast moving.
And all doing something very different to what they typically do.
Exactly. So that happens, and it's great, and it's fantastic that Julia Hickey will keep on producing.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I'm looking forward to watching the next show. All right. So then what happened? So you're out of university, presumably by now, I'm assuming.
Yes, then I started doing some marketing.
Of course.
Youth marketing consultancy, marketing.
Because you knew the audience, you knew the market, you had some very successful brands.
Theatre Unplugged, Flat 4 gave me that kind of hands-on. And I started it as well, but you learn more from doing.
Of course.
I always tell people university is great for the networks, friendships, and the way you think. But when it comes to practical, you need to get out there. Yeah. You need to work. And this is why I sometimes don't agree with the stipend systems, because if you don't have a stipend, you need to get a part-time job. Yeah. And through work, you discover so much, and it's important to work, get your hands dirty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super cool.
What most students would think about removing that stipend.
No, I'm not saying remove it, but then the system used to penalize. I never got a stipend because I used to work and have a second income. I lost my stipend.
Okay.
So I was penalized because I wanted to work.
Yeah.
Got it?
The message
anyway.
there is wrong. But okay,
But
so,
anyway.
so then you started doing youth
So
marketing.
then I did youth marketing, etc., etc. And then I suddenly decided I need to get out of Malta.
What was it that pushed you to do that?
I just realized that I'm growing older, 27.
You're 27. Well, I mean,
But you're growing older.
of course.
And I said, I'm going to get stuck here. And I wanted to push myself outside of my comfort zone. Again, why?
And you moved to?
And I moved to Sydney for a holiday initially, stayed there for 9 months, and then moved from Sydney to New York for another 3 years.
Wow. And you were working for?
And initially, I met a Maltese Australian, had a big aviation company. And then he asked me to go to the States and run the thing for them in the States.
So somehow the aviation industry keeps pulling you back and reminding you what
this
you
was
could have done.
B2B, like ticketing, B2B, doing deals between airlines, supporting the local network that says this. But again, it was tough. When you go to New York for a holiday, is great. When you go to live there,
could be very
the
lonely.
weather, the seasons, you're lonely, you're there. You never make enough money in these cities. You walk out of the door, costs you money, And but I was always comfortable because of my childhood in my own space.
Yeah.
So I remember there were days I spoke to either a client or someone at a bar. That's all. And then you start building your network. So 3 years in the States helped me see the world differently, that we're just a number, we're nothing. You meet people who are super successful and they're so humble. So you get out of the big fish, small pond syndrome.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Funny enough, Lee and I were having this chat about the concept of living in Malta and doing so much in this country, but then stepping out of this. And I do feel that sometimes we do have this, I wouldn't say it's an island curse, okay? It is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it is relatively easy, or you can do it relatively fast to become very successful in Malta, as long as you're doing things right.
Yeah.
So if you want to build an agency, if you want to build a brand, if you want to build something, if you do all the right things, we talk about music as well. If you're good at what you do, you can very, very quickly get to the top charts in Malta, because obviously the amount of competition that you have is obviously not as huge. But very, very, very few people either have the courage to get out and let go of the local success to try and make it out on international waters. Those that do and those that, persist do actually then achieve it. But it is very, very hard to find yourself on the number one track on the radio stations locally, to be a no one and a nobody.
And because of fear.
Because of fear.
Fear. People are afraid. People are afraid to cold call because of the fear of rejection.
Yeah.
And I tell people, what's the worst case scenario? You come back, but do it.
Let's talk a bit about failure, because I think that's a really important thing. And we talk about, you've talked about the waves. And when we talk about the waves, there's always like the beautiful crest, which is, amazing. But there's also, deep down in the barrel of the wave. And if I had to look at your career, you've had a number of those ups and downs. I remember when you so I think I'm going to fast forward to Choose Malta.
Yeah.
Or Choose to Travel.
ChooseMalta.com. Yeah.
Choose Malta started in 2005.
When I came back from the States. Yeah. So no, 2005.
2005, yeah.
At the time, I used to go around living in the States, living the online development, buying this, etc. I realized that we needed a travel portal, and to promote incoming tourism, but in real time. So I actually used to go around hotels to try and convince them to come on.
So just for those who don't know, okay, so there was a time before the internet, and there was also a time before the internet where, when the internet came along, booking a hotel, which is something that we take, a standard now, had to be done typically through travel agencies, or you'd call up, you'd book hotel, you'd give your credit card details
over the phone, or through a travel agent.
So you came in pre-booking.com with this concept.
In line with booking.com, in line with them, same time.
Okay.
Same time with Book. And I remember I eventually worked with booking.com on something as well. So I used to go to booking.com in the office in Amsterdam when they were new. So, but again, it's the mindset of sometimes in business and people who are entrepreneurs, sometimes they launch something, they realize the idea is great, but they're a bit too early.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying I was early, but I had to go through the motions of trying to convince people on the need.
Of course, it's a very big upward struggle when you're the first,
Exactly.
Especially then coming back to traditional Malta, where things were happily staying the same because obviously with people didn't have to pay commissions or whatever.
Yeah.
But you very quickly, became successful
Because of the brand.
because of the brand, and you built the business Choose to Travel, and then you had Choose Malta,
then we had
Choose
80
Cyprus,
travel
Choose
websites.
Dubai.
Exactly. We had 80 travel websites.
And you went from like a couple of, I remember seeing you guys. There was you, there was Chris Knights,
Yes,
there was
exactly.
Kate Arrigo,
Yeah,
there was a bunch of other people sitting down at Saddles discussing this new concept. So Chris Knights was now a partner at Unbrandme, was the
Founder.
tech
Amazing
founder
guy.
effectively at Choose to Travel. And you went from, setting up this thing as a very sort of, very typical, startup fashion.
Yeah.
Working within an apartment. I remember the apartment was in Pietà, I think, or something.
Pietà. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you kind of got to the top of the game. It was 2008. You had 2 floors in this massive new apartment. You had
I think 20 people, developers.
20 developers. I remember it was one of the first offices I ever walked into with an actual chomba.
Yes,
with a
that's
table
right.
soccer table
table soccer.
and PlayStations. And this was pre the Silicon Valley stories and the concepts. And obviously that was quite, to me, it was quite impressive to see that happening at the time. I mean, you were, ahead of the curve in talks of, employer branding and employer benefits and employee. This is a time where people had to be at the office at a specific time.
Yeah.
Still dress up smart if you were working in an office, put your shirt on, get to work. You have a 1 hour lunch break.
Yeah.
You did your break.
I used to cook for them and play chomba for 2 hours.
And the company went, to a huge successful level.
Did really well. But then there was the
financial
recession.
crisis.
Yeah, 2009. So what happened then? We were burning more money than we were making.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, if we were overseas, if we had funding, if we had seed investors, if we had venture capitalists, and this is the struggle here, you see.
Yeah.
So we had a great idea. We used to rank on AdWords. If you search Malta hotels, hotel in Malta, we used to rank on Google organically before Expedia, before Booking, even for other searches like Dubai hotels in Dubai.
Wow.
Chris was fantastic like that. But because we didn't have millions of euros to spend money to promote the brand, we lost. A client did not know us. Mm-hmm. So there was an element of trust. So it's good to have a great brand, but then you need to get the message across and the values of the brand, and you need money to do that.
Yeah, but I think
at
also,
that level, international.
Yeah, I think from a perspective of funding and having the funding to keep it going, I think that was obviously one of the big areas. There's obviously luck, and there's obviously the reality. You were there before most of these hotels had a booking engine.
Yeah. Then they came on board.
Then they started to create their own booking engine. Yeah. And then there was a direct to consumer, which at that point in time, even Expedia and Booking.com's had a hit, because at one point they were the only way you could have, what we call the online travel agencies, the OTAs. Yeah. There was a system that you basically had to, go through Booking.com if you wanted to book somewhere else. But then all of a sudden you came to the point where hotels started inventing and building their own, engines and booking engines, which I believe you supplied at some point in time as well. And you helped them build them.
Yeah.
And then financial crisis hits, the world goes into one big tumble turn and keeps on spinning and spinning and spinning. And, the high came with a big, with a big hit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel like, but it would be great if you could share a bit of that moment when everything you've built, and you were a very successful entrepreneur, co-founder in this amazing business, all of a sudden when you started to see that decline, and the decisions you had to take at that point in time, whether you took the right decisions, whether they were fast enough. I mean, looking at it now with hindsight, and of course, clearly you've survived and you've built other great businesses since, and you've been very successful. How did it feel at that time, and what did you learn?
It's tough because you'd be, for 24 hours, you're breathing the company name. You are the brand. You become the brand.
Yeah.
So ChooseMalta.com and myself were one. Suddenly, it's like you lost your name. It's like you lost your identity. And you lost it out there, but inside you feel you lost your purpose. What was driving you is suddenly lost. So you go in this gray area. Now what? it happened. It happens. You know, it happens. Even people go through phases.
Of course.
You know? And so but you're closely related to your brand, to your work, and not because I'm not a workaholic. I was never a workaholic, but I'm passionate about what I do, and I want to do it well, and I enjoy it. So suddenly, what used to enjoy doing is no longer there, or there's no more purpose, no more future. So you go into this inner voice. At the time, I was not trained like I am now. And that voice, that inner voice, the monkey in your head, I call it, derails you completely. So it creates burnout, health issues. I had burnout twice. I used to lose eyesight sometimes with burnout. And you feel like you're getting a stroke, which, you know, late nights, work, stress, financial pressures, and the unknown, the uncertainty.
And the responsibility.
And responsibility. I had to lay people off. People who were really attached to us were like friends and families.
Yeah.
And they thought they had a future. At one point, we were talk of going bigger and overseas.
Yeah, of
so
course,
suddenly, that dream is shattered.
So
I'm moving too much.
No, it's fine.
So you actually find yourself in no man's land again. So now what? And then you have to
talk about
the pieces.
This is an interesting point, which we tap into quite often in the Unbrandme podcast, which is the relationship between you and your own personal brand and the brand that you've built. And this was now what your third, fourth, fifth brand that you've built effectively. So you have now experienced the detachment of you can detach yourself from a brand. You're no longer Jonathan of Junkie Pesho, you are Jonathan of Choose Malta. But now all of a sudden you find that into a space where this is not you taking the decision, I want to stop this. This is everything, market forces, life in general, deciding that this is the time for you to stop this. You very quickly bounce back.
Yes.
What did you do then?
Then I had two friends who had a retail company. So they were in fashion. And we decided to get a brand to Malta together. And we built fashion business.
So you bring in the Tommy Hilfiger brand.
So then we got Tommy Hilfiger to Malta.
And these were two friends who you used to work for. You used to consult with the youth market. Which was, and you were extremely successful.
Yes, Tommy, yes.
And because in the past when we talk about O'Neill was one of the biggest brands out there that everybody had to be seen with. And you were always very, very good at creating a cult following for these type of brands, which I think was amazing. I remember you organizing the O'Neill wakeboarding festivals and all that. And a lot of people are still recovering from injuries from those days. Some of those are our friends. Yeah. Okay, Choose to Travel is out of the question.
So we do the fashion.
You do the fashion.
Armani jeans, etc. But then 4 years down the line, I decided to move on and I needed a break. So I realized that in a way, being full on since the age of 21, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, longer, 8 years ago, maybe at the age of 41.
Yeah.
I decided, you know what, life is too short, I'm tired. I actually started getting tired. And
was that your first midlife crisis, John?
Probably. Yeah. Again, ahead of my time.
Ahead of your time.
So midlife crisis, I get into sports with our group, common friends, train, have a sabbatical. I said, let me take a year off.
You write a book?
Write a book because I had nothing to do. And then I also decided to start a new project, an amazing project, heritage, art, this in Malta. But obviously being a cultural heritage, an old place, which is in the hands of a private company, is still constraints, planning, not planning. And I burn a lot of money. Yeah. I burn a lot of money in trying to see the project through. It doesn't go through. I was misguided by enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm. So you let your excitement, your energy get away with yourself.
And I miscalculated. I was maybe also had the wrong advice. But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. Mm-hmm. So you can't blame anyone. But then I knew when to pull the plug. It was tough, but I knew when to stop the hemorrhage. And I cut my losses just before COVID. And I remember that's it. It's not going to fly. It's taking too long. Again, time burns money.
Yeah.
That's the problem sometimes. So you can have brilliant brand, brilliant idea, but it's the rate of growth or how long something is going, because time,
of course,
is passing.
When you look back at that time, because obviously I saw you live through that time. And there were moments where you were definitely at your happiest, or at least you looked at your freest.
Completely.
You had 2 motorbikes, you had the boat, you had, at one point you even bought a jet ski. Classic.
Small boat.
Yeah. But that was your classic midlife crisis, not to an extent.
Because I need to enjoy my time, not because from a money point of view.
No, for sure. And you enjoyed it.
Yeah, because I had the time. I had time to use them.
And I think, one thing which is really interesting about that is that for me, on the outside looking in, it looked like the Great Reset.
Completely. I needed it.
One thing which we missed out on pre-reset is that you decided to become an MEP. You applied for the European elections. How the hell did that get into the whole story?
Something was calling me to push myself into something I never did again.
Something that was bigger than you. Something that you felt like you had to contribute to.
And also, but not from a social point of view, like Mother Teresa to help. Don't get me wrong.
Of course.
I got a kick from people speaking, interacting, trying to add value, driving change. So in work, work is so political. People are so political. Branding is political. So families are political.
Yeah.
So I felt that, okay, I can give a new twist to this approach. So my wife, who's very private, tells me, John, go for it, but on one condition, one try. She's smart. She knew one try wouldn't be enough. So she said, one try. And no local politics, was very tribal. And I did 9 months campaign MEP. It was fantastic, tough. But I had to do my first public speak, go on TV, debate. I met some great people. I met everything. You go into people's houses, you meet people, and you see Malta in a different, outside of your fishbowl,
Yeah.
So I was very outspoken. I told the party, hey, listen, I'm a bit not liberal, I'm tolerant. So I'm not like... I value business because through business there's profit. Profit gives employment and wealth. I'm against spring hunting, so I don't care. So I'm gonna voice that. I respect people who go for catch, it's their thing, but I have an opinion as well. So I'm not judging the individual. I'm judging the behavior, the act. And I was pro civil union, and I had my own stand. But then I realized. I loved it, but then local politics was not for me.
Yeah.
As much as I would love to
be able to contribute,
be able to do it, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And this is when you need to realize.
And I think if in the Great Reset of Jonathan Shaw, I think there was also another interesting angle that you decided to go and start studying again.
Yes,
and the interesting thing is that you went in to study something which you knew could help people at an individual level, because you went and you studied as a cognitive behavioral coach, right?
Exactly. So I was going through this bad phase of having lost a project, lost money, and finding myself at the age of what was supposed to be a 1 year sabbatical, 3 years later.
At 43.
43 or 44.
Yeah.
What shall I do?
What's next?
And I had nothing to do. I didn't want to just do something. I didn't want to do retail or consultancy. I wanted to do something.
Yeah, to help.
To help, but also I knew I needed myself deep down, subconsciously.
So you must getting help for yourself by getting to study what you needed best.
Exactly.
That's
so
really
I became my own patient.
Patient number one.
Patient number one. I used to go to London for 8 months, 1 week a month. And that was a lot of time on my own, thinking and rethinking life, resetting. Also being critical of yourself, of your own brand. And there were things which I had to change and mold as well. So I became more aware of, okay, this is good. This sometimes comes across like this. You're perceived like this. So in branding, we need to manage, in a way, perception and how people perceive us. It's not just how you think.
And there has to be action behind the words.
Exactly.
So you did the hard work.
So I went to the School of Psychologists in London and I got trained in cognitive behavior coaching. It sounds heavy, complicated. It's not. It's basically the way you think determines how you behave.
Yeah.
So when you have an issue, it's not the issue, it's not the situation, it's not the problem, it's how you think about it that matters. So calm down, analyze your thinking habits, your process, and move forward from there. So I regrouped and I started looking at cognitive behavior in teams, in individuals, in management and things like that. And it was fun. It's great. I wish I learned this 20, 30 years ago.
I think it's interesting to say that you wish that, but I don't believe that you'd have been in a position to merge the insight and the education with the experience that you have had from your own life and the exposure that you've had to multiple facets from so many different angles of the business and community and social angles to be able, to empower you to deliver what you delivered.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, took you or prepared you and got you, in the perfect state that you could have ever been to tackle on what has been the latest, biggest project, effectively, to help, support, and bring, a number of different individually owned supermarkets together to kick off Malta's biggest, largest Maltese chain of supermarkets, which is now Welbee's, right?
Yeah.
That must have been one big, heavy project.
It was, but it started, they had already been discussing this. So they were towards the end of the merger.
You were already chairman at that point when they decided?
At one point, they had asked me to help many years ago.
So this is,
they called me back.
We're right, yeah?
They called me back now recently, I think 4 years ago. And they were close to the merger. And they had some change in management. And they said, one of the directors reached out, hey, would you be interested to chair one meeting a month to see us through? I said, yes. 2 months later, they say, hey, can you also chair the strategy group, which happens every week? I said, fine. 4 months later, we merge. And then we started the projects, the rebrand.
Of course.
Which I worked closely with you, which was a process, amazing process. I learned a lot there. And I'm so proud of that work and the way we tackled the emotional attachment that clients have with brands.
Of course.
And how if someone used to love a particular supermarket, you can't overnight destroy what they love because you have a new name. No.
Because it's part of their community, it's part of their habits, it's part of what they do every day.
Exactly.
And you tackled effectively, there was Tower supermarkets, there was the value supermarkets, there was Park Towers.
And trolleys.
Yes.
So we could not tell people, hey, Welbee's is better now. No, it's only a name. So we tackled it, and I'm so proud of how we tackled it. But then the new change came again, because being on a board is great, So we were driving change, doing the corporate transformation again. So I love change. I'm a change maker, I think. With all the good and the bad, I'm a change maker.
So to answer the question from the very beginning,
exactly. I'm a change maker. Now you gave me the answer. I love it. And for me, give me a company. Give me an individual. Give me a project that needs to change. No one wants to touch. Give it to me. Give it to me. I love it. So, but then we were looking for a CEO, and for some reason, they turned on to me. So I was interviewing people. I said, why don't you do it, John? So at the age of 49, I decided to be CEO. And it's the first time in my life I went into employment.
Wow. After so many years, the last employment
doing
was...
my own things.
Yeah,
no, because even with the aviation, I was like a freelancer in the States. Wow. So it's the first time I was on the books as being employed, happened to me now. And it's as much as it's great. I love what I do. I love the fact I love the fact that the directors trusted me with something they built over the years, because there's a lot of pressure and responsibility.
There's 2 generations of families. Yeah.
Exactly. And we employ a lot of people. We buy from a lot of local importers. So we're a big player in the industry, and we will grow more. And I want to grow it more, but sustainably. But at the same time, I'm like, suddenly not freedom, because I have freedom, but I'm employed. And again, it plays on you, because usually it happens in the reverse. So I kind of, typical me, it's like, okay, move this, that, up, down, there's that. It's progress, don't get me wrong. It's a way forward, and there's nothing wrong being employed. But for me, it was totally new.
And again, coming back to that change, but I also believe that to be able to be in a position to have the impact that you're having, at some point in time, I think you need to form part of something bigger, because Jonathan Shaw alone would not have been able to do this.
Completely.
And also the interesting thing is that being employed for so long, people within organizations who have been brought up and habitually grown to survive within organizations also feel uncomfortable then with doing such big change, because you've done significant change, and significant change within the organization, significant change within communities. You have changed the way people shop and buy. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting angle. Along this route, sports has played a very, very important part of your life, and I've seen it. This morning we're training together. Over the weekend we're training together. I've always seen John Shaw as a huge fan and support of everybody who's trying hard. You have been a great cheerleader to many of us out there. Not the sexiest of cheerleaders, but definitely a cheerleader out there, helping people really accomplish and feeling good about themselves, because again, you're affecting, the what people are thinking about and how they're seeing themselves, which then affects behaviors. Last year, I think, or was it the year before, you went and you did probably the most significant race of your life.
Yeah, last year. Something which many athletes out there, many endurance athletes out there would not even contemplate taking part in. And I'd like you to talk a bit about those people who don't know what you did and how you did it, but more than the sporting endeavor, I'd like you to tap into what went through your head in those tough times where you needed to pick yourself up, but also where your partner needed to be picked up. So swim, run, how did you get into that? We know, but let's just jump in straight into the race. So you decided to do what? What was the race? So it's a 75 kilometer race in the Baltic Sea and the Swedish archipelago. So you swim and run across maybe 30, 40 islands, and you run with a wetsuit, you swim with shoes, and you keep on going down in a straight line. You have a teammate because of safety, because obviously it's not marshaled and monitored throughout, but you have a route. And Robin ran with me, swam run with me, and I wasn't trained enough. You're never trained enough, but you just go for it.
But let's face it, you weren't trained enough, because this is all of a sudden, you got into the sport a couple of years before that. You're not a full-time athlete. Exactly. You're not a professional athlete.
Exactly, because I train a lot, but you're not, for these races, you're not. But my aim was to go.
Your very first long-distance endurance race.
Well,
you hadn't done any 50Ks, you hadn't done any 30Ks
and I said enjoy it. Enjoy the ride. We had cut-off times. So we go for it. I'm, relatively okay swimming. So the swimming was not an issue. So it's 65 kilometer trail running, treacherous trail running, and 10 kilometers swimming in and out. But so you know how it is. Yeah. You have different. So we start
in cold, dark.
Oh, yeah, but we had a good day. The weather was not bad that day. So considering it was okay.
Nature treated you well.
Exactly. So you go for it and you love it. You're racing with other athletes, a lot of pros, but it's the adventure,
John, I want to stop you, because I know that you're really enjoying this part and you enjoy it, but I know that you went to some tough times.
Yes, of course.
So let's go straight to the point.
So 15K into the race, I get this massive spasm, hamstring injury. I'm actually falling onto the ground. So you have the pressure mentally that you don't want to let yourself down. You don't want to let your partner down. People, friends, knowing you're doing the race, not from an ego point of view, but
there's the pressure.
There's the pressure.
You told everyone
and you want to do it.
Of course.
And you want to do it. I remember my marketing guy put it on Facebook on our company page. Good luck. So that's 50,000 followers who know that I'm doing this race. No pressure. But anyway, but you go through. So I walk, manage the pain, and then you start again. So in a 12-hour race, and that's how long it took us, the mind plays. But again, I think if you're solution focused, if you have the right approach, I was actually micro-breaking the distances. I was driving Robin mad. I was hyper, singing, tuning. I was psyching myself up to the race with rocky music. I know it's cheesy, but you know, you have to psych yourself up. So when you're in the shit, you get these tools back. So I was humming tunes, I was micromanaging on my watch the distance. So with 50K left, 50 kilometers to go, I'm telling him we only have 300 meters to go because I was breaking the distance. And then I got out of my problem, then Robin got. So you need to support others. They need to support you. And this is teamwork.
Yeah.
And this is where you need to surround yourself with people who are not the best, that they are the best for you. Got it?
Yeah.
Because people try and look in forming teams and build brands, the best people in the market. No. Who's the best for you?
Yeah. So you do this experience.
Yeah. Beautiful race.
And Robin still speaks to you, which is obviously great news. I think this is a great place to pause on this podcast. And I say pause because knowing you and knowing the change maker who now self-proclaimed, or well, you're definitely going to be on to bigger things, and you're definitely going to be on to other changes. And of course, I'd love to see where that's going to take you.
Even I.
But before we go there, because everybody knows that you're not going to sit back and you're just going to just expect that things are going to... So you're going to be changing some other stuff soon, I'm sure. Even though I have no clue what they're at, but I'm excited to know what it is. Change is something that we all struggle with, okay, except you. Most of us struggle with change. To people out there who are building brands, to people out there who've built brands and those brands are failing, and to people out there who are just at the very, very beginning of the journey, like if you had to pick 3 things, 3 values, 3 principles, or even 1, but no more than 3, lessons to keep people going, mantras that you... Okay. Are there any specific mantras that you keep reminding yourself?
Yeah. So one of them, which I use, is everything will be okay.
Okay.
Just save it on your phone when you're going through a tough time. Write it somewhere, look at it, read it, repeat it. Everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. Yeah. It always does. It's a matter of when and how, but everything will be okay. And if it won't be okay, you couldn't do anything anyway on it. So, but just focus on that. Everything will be okay. 2, struggle is growth. Embrace struggle. If you want to grow your muscles, what do? You go to the gym.
Resistance training.
You go to the gym, yeah? So what if I tell you, see as mental struggle as your gym?
Yeah.
Without struggle, there's no growth. So if you start seeing repositioning struggle as growth, when you have struggle, you're going to embrace it. You're going to welcome it. So your mindset towards it is different. Give me struggle, give me change. So I grow.
Yeah.
So you see, so you're already smiling at it rather than being afraid. So flip it round. And the third mantra is just give it your best. And then you just know that you gave it your best. Because if you gave it your best shot, even if you fail, you don't have regrets.
But you've learned.
You've learned, but you've given it your best. Because you'll have bigger regrets if you said, I should have done this, I should have given it more, I didn't give it my own, because then it's you against you.
Yeah. So really go push yourself and keep pushing yourself till you know that you've done your best.
And then what happens, because we can't control everything.
Of course.
We can contain, not control. Learn how to live with something, not control it.
I think those are great lessons. John.
That's it.
As if. There's one last question. In this changing, turbulent, great, beautiful wave life that you've led and surfed, because you've surfed it well. Yeah. You've definitely, lived probably more than most people have lived in your lifetime. And we've been through one midlife crisis. There's probably another one around the corner.
Always. God
knows what's next. If you had to choose one track, one piece of music as a soundtrack to your life story thus far, what would it be?
The Show Must Go On by Queen.
Nice. Fantastic.
Because when I'm going through tough times, I play it. And obviously it's show, close. Okay. I say, show must go on.
The show must go on.
Just go on and see what happens.
John,
this is very private. I never share this with anyone.
I swear we won't tell anyone about it. Okay.
Let's see.
one thing I want to tell you, don't trust anyone in marketing. John, thank you so much for your time. You've been very, very generous for giving us your time this morning. I know you've got a lot of stuff on your plate.
It's fine. I love this.
Well, I really enjoyed it. And even though I've been knowing you for so many years, I learned a lot about you this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you
Pleasure,
for that.
man.
John, grazie.
Cheers.